The medical bay on the Galactic Council warship hummed with the soft blue glow of regeneration pods. I stood there, all 7 of my optical sensors fixed on the human sitting casually on the examination table, legs dangling like a youngling waiting for treats. My name is Vorthal, Senior Medical Officer of the 4th Fleet, and in my 300 cycles of service, I thought I had seen every species in this corner of the galaxy. I had patched up Theran warriors after their blood duels. I had regenerated Quillick's limbs that had been dissolved by plasma fire. I had even managed to save a Draxon who had somehow gotten his breathing tubes tangled with his digestive tract. Do not ask me how. The answer still haunts my dreams. But humans were something else entirely. This particular human went by the name Marcus Reeve. He was a mercenary, a problem solver, a consultant. Those were the polite terms. The impolite terms involved several words that my translator refused to process without issuing a warning about crude language. He had been hired by the Council to assist with a particularly nasty border dispute in the outer colonies, and from what I had heard through the ship's gossip channels, he had resolved it in approximately 4 standard hours. The dispute had been going on for 6 years. "So, Doc," Marcus said, flashing that bizarre human expression where they showed their teeth. I had learned this was called a smile, though it looked alarmingly like a threat display. "What's the verdict? Am I dying? Because I have plans next week and I would hate to cancel." I checked my data pad again, my anterior manipulators trembling slightly as I reviewed the scan results. "Mr. Reeve, I have completed your mandatory physical examination as required by Council regulations for all contracted personnel. However, I must confess that I am somewhat confused." Confused? He tilted his head, another one of those strange human gestures. "Is it the metal plate? Because I can explain that one. Actually, that is a funny story involving a bar, a wager, and a very angry Krogan who did not appreciate my opinions on his mother. No, Mr. Reeve. Though I will note that you have a titanium plate in your skull, yes. Along with 3 synthetic vertebrae, a reinforced left femur, 17 healed fracture sites, evidence of 3rd-degree burns across 20% of your torso, signs of previous radiation exposure, what appears to be shrapnel still embedded in your right shoulder, and..." I paused, tilting my sensory stalks in disbelief. "Is that a knife blade fragment lodged next to your 7th rib?" Marcus glanced down at his chest as if he could see through his own skin. "Oh yeah, that one is from Theta Station. The guy really did not want to give up his smuggling operation. Turns out stabbing someone is an ineffective deterrent when they are high on adrenaline and really annoyed." "You left it in." My voice rose several frequencies, a sign of distress in my species. "Well, you know how it is. I was busy at the time. There was shooting, some explosions, a hostage situation. By the time things calmed down, the wound had closed up around it, and I figured, hey, what is one more piece of foreign matter in my body? I have been collecting quite a few at this point." I set down my data pad and fixed all 7 eyes on him with what I hoped conveyed the appropriate level of medical authority. "Mr. Reeve, I have reviewed the medical histories of over 4,000 species. Most beings go their entire lives without sustaining injuries of this magnitude. You appear to have accumulated them as a hobby." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed through the medical bay, startling 2 junior technicians who were calibrating equipment in the corner. "A hobby? Doc, that is the nicest way anyone has ever called me reckless. Usually I get words like suicidal or insane, or my personal favorite, that absolute maniac. These injuries should have killed you multiple times. Your species does not have regenerative capabilities. You do not have redundant organ systems. You do not even have a proper exoskeleton. You are, biologically speaking, soft and easily damaged." "Soft and easily damaged," Marcus repeated, grinning wider. "You should write greeting cards, Doc. You have a real gift with words." I was not amused. "How are you alive?" He shrugged, which made the shrapnel in his shoulder visible on my scanner display. shifting slightly with the movement. Stubbornness, good luck, outstanding medical care from people significantly more skilled than they are appreciated? Take your pick. Your file says you have been in 347 combat engagements. That they know about, he corrected cheerfully. Pardon? That file only has the official ones, the ones with paperwork and incident reports. There are a bunch of unofficial ones that nobody bothered to document. Freelance work does not always come with proper record keeping. I felt what humans would call a headache forming, despite not having a head in the traditional sense. Mr. Reeve, I need to ask you something that has been bothering me since I reviewed your scans. Shoot. Please do not say that on a military vessel, but very well. Your preliminary questionnaire asked if you had any war wounds. You checked yes, but provided no details. Given what I am seeing here, I must ask for clarification. Which wounds were you referring to specifically? Marcus looked at me for a long moment, and then that grin returned, somehow even wider than before. Which ones? Doc, that is adorable. I collect them. You collect them, I repeated flatly. Sure, every scar has a story. Every piece of metal has a memory. Every healed bone is proof that I survived something that should have killed me. You see a medical disaster. I see a roadmap of bad decisions and good luck. I consulted my datapad again, hoping it would provide some logical explanation for this. Madness. It did not. The shrapnel in your shoulder, the knife fragment in your ribs, these could be removed. They pose potential long-term health risks. Infection, migration, nerve damage. Could be removed, he agreed. But then how would I win bets at parties? Bets. Sure, I bet people they cannot guess how many pieces of foreign objects I have in my body. I have never lost. Current count is 11, by the way, in case you were wondering. 12 if you count the dental work from that time on Praxis 7, but I think that is cheating since it was intentional. This conversation had moved far beyond my medical training. I had studied xenobiology for decades. I understood cellular regeneration, quantum healing matrices, bioorganic fusion therapy. Nowhere in my education had anyone prepared me for a species that treated their body like a scrapyard and found it entertaining. Mr. Reeve, I am required to offer you corrective surgery for any condition that may impact your combat effectiveness. Pass. You understand that you are currently carrying around enough metal to set off half the security scanners in council space? Oh, I know. It is hilarious every single time. You should see the looks on the guards' faces when I walk through. They think they have caught a smuggler, and then the scanner just keeps beeping and beeping and beeping. That does not sound hilarious. That sounds like a security nightmare. Depends on your perspective, Doc. I made several notations on my datapad, most of them variations of patient refuses treatment and possible psychological evaluation needed. Very well, I cannot force you to undergo procedures you do not consent to. However, I must file a report with your commanding officer regarding your current medical status. Cool. Tell General Kravax I said hi. And remind him he still owes me 50 credits from that card game last month. You played cards with General Kravax? Sure. Nice guy. Terrible poker face. Well, terrible poker carapace. Whatever you want to call it. I decided not to pursue that line of inquiry. There were some things I did not want to know. Is there anything else I should be aware of? Any other injuries, conditions, or foreign objects I should document? Marcus considered this for a moment, tapping his chin in a thoughtful gesture. Well, there was that time I got poisoned by a Hectorin dart, and the incident with the parasitic organism on Outpost 90. Oh, and I definitely got exposed to some kind of nerve agent during that mess on the mining colony, but I took some pills for that one, so it probably does not count. Probably does not count, I echoed, my manipulators now trembling with what was definitely not medical concern, but rather existential dread about the fragility of human existence. You know what the funny thing is, Doc? Marcus hopped off the examination table, landing on his reinforced femur without even a wince. Most humans are tougher than me. I just have a very eventful career path. Go to Earth sometime. Visit a hospital. You will find people who have survived car crashes, building collapses, falls from absurd heights, diseases that should have killed them, and they just keep going. We are very hard to kill when we decide we are not done yet. That is not funny, Mr. Reeve. That is terrifying. He patted me on what I suppose he thought was my shoulder, but was actually one of my sensory appendages. I tried not to flinch. You say terrifying. I say survival characteristics. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Doc. It helps to be a little bit unkillable. A little bit. Okay, a lot of it. But in my defense, I have been very successful at not dying so far. I plan to continue that trend. Your medical history suggests that plan has been challenged frequently. True, but I am still here annoying medical professionals across council space. That has to count for something. I watched him head toward the exit, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had survived things that would have reduced most species to their component molecules. Just before he reached the door, I called out, "Mr. Reeve?" He turned back. "Yeah, Doc." "The radiation exposure, where was that from?" His expression shifted, becoming something I had not seen yet. Serious. Almost grim. "Reactor breach on a civilian transport. Pirates decided hostages were not worth the effort of keeping alive. They tried to trigger a meltdown." "They tried?" "I stopped them. Got a pretty hefty dose in the process, but everyone on that transport made it home. 347 people, Doc. Kids, families, elderly folks. Worth every gray of radiation." I understood then. It was not that humans were careless with their lives. It was that they measured the value of their lives differently than most species. They would trade their safety, their health, even their longevity for something they deemed more important: protection of others, completion of a mission, principle. It was illogical, inefficient, completely impractical. It was also strangely admirable. "The Council is fortunate to have contracted your services," I said formally. "The Council is fortunate I needed the money," he replied with a wink, another bizarre human gesture involving one eye. "Take care, Doc. I will see you in 6 months for my next physical. Try not to have a breakdown when you see what new injuries I have picked up by then." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my datapad full of alarming medical notes and a growing appreciation and for why humans had earned such a strange reputation across the galaxy. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most intelligent or the longest lived. But they were incredibly difficult to stop once they decided they had something to do. I began writing my report to General Kravax, wondering how exactly to phrase "we have hired someone who treats life-threatening injuries as collectibles in a way that would not cause immediate alarm." Eventually, I settled on "cleared for active duty" with notation of extensive previous trauma and left it at that. The general could discover the details himself when Marcus inevitably set off every security scanner between here and the mission site. I had a feeling that was going to be very soon. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in the command center of the Council flagship, watching the tactical display with a growing sense of what humans called dread. General Kravax stood beside me, his chitinous plates clicking together in the rhythm that indicated deep concentration, or possibly indigestion. With his species, it was difficult to tell. "Explain to me again," the general said slowly, "how one human managed to infiltrate a fortified enemy position, disable their primary weapons array, rescue 2 hostages, and escape with only minor injuries." I consulted my medical scanner, which I had been monitoring remotely since Marcus had departed on his mission. The Council had insisted I keep track of his vital signs as a precautionary measure. Given what I knew about his medical history, I had agreed immediately. "According to my readings, General, Mr. Reeve currently has a fractured rib, a dislocated shoulder that he appears to have relocated himself, multiple lacerations, and what I believe is a concussion. And he considers these minor injuries. By his standards, yes. He is currently piloting the extraction shuttle back to the ship. His vital signs are stable, though his heart rate is elevated." "Elevated from combat stress?" I checked the readings again. No, sir, elevated from what appears to be singing, very loudly. My audio sensors are picking up something about purple rain. General Kravax turned 3 of his eyes toward me. Purple rain. I do not understand it either, sir. Human cultural references remain largely incomprehensible to me, despite my best efforts. The general made a sound like grinding rocks, which I had learned was his version of a sigh. When I approved hiring human contractors, I was assured they were professional, efficient, and reliable. They are all those things, sir. I was not told they were completely insane. That may have been an oversight in the briefing materials. The tactical display showed Marcus's shuttle approaching the landing bay. I gathered my medical kit and prepared to meet him, already mentally cataloging the supplies I would need. Bone stabilizers for the ribs, neural balm for the concussion, regenerative gel for the lacerations, possibly a sedative if he proved difficult about accepting treatment. Definitely a sedative. The landing bay was crowded when I arrived. Word had spread quickly about the success of the mission, and it seemed half the crew wanted to see the human who had accomplished in 4 hours what the Council's best tactical teams had failed to do in 2 months. I pushed through the crowd, my medical authority granting me priority. Access. The shuttle's ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Marcus emerged, and I immediately noted that my remote diagnostics had been optimistic. He was limping. His left arm hung at an awkward angle that suggested the shoulder relocation had not been entirely successful. Blood seeped through his tactical suit in at least 6 places. His face was covered in dirt, burn residue, and what appeared to be someone else's blood. He was grinning like he had just won the galaxy's largest lottery. "Doc," he called out, waving with his good arm. "Miss me, because I definitely collected some new additions to the collection. You are going to love this, or hate it. Probably hate it, but it will be educational. Mr. Reeve, you need immediate medical attention." "Do I? I feel fine." "Well, fine adjacent, in the general neighborhood of fine. You have a fractured rib." "Just one. I was worried it might be 2. This is great news." "That is not great news." My voice rose again, causing several nearby crew members to step back nervously. "You also have a concussion, multiple lacerations, and your shoulder is still dislocated despite your attempt to fix it." He glanced down at his shoulder as if noticing it for the first time. "Huh. Yeah, that did not pop back in quite right. Felt a bit off when I was climbing through the ventilation shaft. You know how it is." "I do not know how it is. Most species avoid climbing through ventilation shafts when they have dislocated joints." "Well, sure, if you want to be reasonable about it. But reasonable does not get 2 hostages out of a locked detention cell past 40 armed guards." General Kravax approached, his plates clicking in what I now recognized as approval. "Mr. Reeve, your mission report?" Marcus straightened slightly, trying to look professional despite resembling something that had been through a trash compactor. "Mission successful, sir. Both hostages recovered unharmed. Enemy weapons array disabled. Took out their communication hub while I was there since the opportunity presented itself. Estimated 4 to 6 weeks before they can restore full operational capacity. Casualties? On their side, depends on how you count. I tried for non-lethal when possible, but a few of them insisted on the lethal option. I obliged. On our side, just me, and I am mostly fine." "Mostly," I interjected sharply. "Mostly," Marcus confirmed. "Nothing that will not heal. Speaking of which, Doc, you got anything for pain? Because now that the adrenaline is wearing off, this shoulder is really starting to complain." I guided him toward the medical bay with perhaps more force than necessary, leaving General Kravax to debrief the hostages. The crowd parted for us, crew members staring at the human who had just accomplished the impossible while bleeding from multiple locations and cracking jokes about it. Back in the medical bay, I directed Marcus to the examination table. He climbed up with difficulty, favoring his injured side. Now that he was under proper lighting, I could assess the full extent of the damage. It was worse than my remote scans had indicated. Mr. Reeve, I need to relocate your shoulder properly. This will be painful. More painful than it is right now. Significantly. Hit me with it, Doc. I have had worse. I positioned myself carefully, taking hold of his arm with my manipulators. On 3, 1, 2. I pulled on 2. A technique I had learned from reading human medical journals. They called it building trust through minor betrayal. The shoulder popped back into place with an audible sound that made me wince. Marcus let out a string of words that my translator again refused to process, followed by several deep breaths. Okay, yeah, that was worse. But also better? Pain is weird like that. I immediately applied a stabilizing field to keep the joint immobile while it began healing. You will need to keep the shoulder still for at least 48 hours. Sure thing, Doc. I promise not to get into any fights, infiltrate any enemy bases, or climb through any more ventilation shafts for at least 2 days. That is not reassuring given that you specified a time limit. I am being realistic about my career path. I moved on to treating the lacerations, cleaning each wound carefully and applying regenerative gel. Most were superficial, caused by crawling through tight spaces and broken glass. One, however, was deeper, a blade wound across his ribs, fresh enough that it had stopped bleeding only recently. This one needs more attention, I said, preparing the dermal regenerator. How did this happen? Guard caught me during the extraction. Had a vibro blade. Fast guy, too. Got a good slice in before I disarmed him. Literally disarmed him. Then I used his own blade to cut through the security door. Seemed poetic at the time. You took a blade away from an armed opponent while injured. Would not be the first time. You know that knife fragment still in my ribs? That was from a similar situation. I am getting better at not keeping souvenirs from these encounters, though. Personal growth. I sealed the wound, watching as the regenerative gel knitted the tissue back together. The deeper injuries would take time, but at least they would heal cleanly. Probably. Human healing was surprisingly robust, despite their lack of obvious regenerative abilities. They simply refused to die from things that should kill them, as if sheer stubbornness had biological weight. The concussion concerns me most, I admitted, running a neural scanner over his head. You show signs of significant impact trauma. What hit you? Which time? There were multiple impacts to your head during this mission? Define multiple, because if you mean more than one, then yes. If you mean more than 5, then also yes. There was an explosion that knocked me into a bulkhead. Then a guard tried to pistol whip me. Then I might have miscalculated a jump and hit my head on a support beam. Then there was this awkward moment involving a fire suppression system. A fire suppression system? Long story. Short version is I triggered it to create a distraction and did not account for the pressure of the discharge. Knocked me flat. But it worked. The guards were very distracted by suddenly being soaked and unable to see. I administered a neural stabilizer, watching his brain activity normalize on my scanner. The human brain was remarkable in its resilience. It sustained damage that would render most species unconscious or worse. Yet Marcus had continued his mission, completed his objectives, and flown a shuttle back while singing about precipitation. You know what is funny, Doc? Marcus said as I worked on setting his fractured rib. This is not even in my top 10 worst missions. That statement does not inspire confidence in your decision-making process. Fair, but hear me out. Top 10 would include the time I got spaced for about 30 seconds, the time I took a plasma bolt to the leg, the time I fought off a bioweapon infection that liquefied 3 other species, the time I... Please stop. My medical anxiety can only handle so much information at once. He laughed, then winced as the laugh jostled his injured rib. Sorry, Doc. I forget that most species find human durability alarming rather than reassuring. It is not durability, Mr. Reeve. It is statistical improbability that you are still alive. Statistical improbability. I like that. Sounds way better than lucky idiot. I finished treating his rib, applying a stabilizing wrap that would support the bone as it healed. The fracture was clean at least. It would heal in a few weeks without complications. Probably. With humans, there were always complications. All finished, I announced, stepping back to review my work. You are to report back here in 24 hours for a follow-up examination. You are restricted from combat operations for 72 hours minimum. You are to avoid strenuous activity, heavy lifting, and anything that might re-injure your shoulder or ribs. Got it. Light duty only. I can do that. Can you? Because your record suggests otherwise. Doc, you wound me. With words this time instead of medical instruments. I am serious, Mr. Reeve. Your body needs time to heal. Even human resilience has limits. He slid off the examination table carefully, testing his weight on his injured leg. Satisfied that it would hold, he looked at me with an expression that was surprisingly sincere. I know, Doc, and I appreciate the concern, really. But here's the thing. What I do, it needs doing. The Council has problems that require solutions. Sometimes those solutions involve people like me taking risks that other species would not or could not take. That does not mean you should take unnecessary risks. Who said they were unnecessary? Every injury I have ever gotten was in service of something important. Protecting people, stopping bad guys, saving lives. Yeah, I collect scars and metal fragments and broken bones. But you know what else I collect? Successful missions. People who get to go home to their families. Problem solved. I consider this, my manipulators clasping together in thought. You measure success by outcomes rather than personal cost. Exactly. And by that measure, I am very successful. Still alive, still effective, still willing to do what needs doing. The injuries are just proof that I do not quit when things get difficult. Or proof that you lack proper self-preservation instincts. Could be both. I contain multitudes. General Kravax entered the medical bay, his plates clicking in a pattern I had not heard before. Curiosity mixed with respect, if I interpreted correctly. Mr. Reeve, the hostages send their gratitude. Both are unharmed thanks to your intervention. Just doing the job, sir. No. You did significantly more than the job required. Your contract specified reconnaissance and tactical assessment. You were not required to execute a solo rescue operation. Marcus shrugged with his good shoulder. Yeah, but once I was there and saw the opportunity, seemed wasteful not to take it. 2 birds, 1 stone, or in this case, 2 hostages, 1 increasingly injured human. The Council wishes to offer you a commendation for exceptional service. Appreciated but not necessary. The pay is commendation enough. And speaking of which, there is a bonus clause in my contract for mission objectives completed ahead of schedule. General Kravax made that grinding sound again. You completed a 2-month operation in 4 hours and now you want a bonus? Contract is a contract, sir. I am many things, but I honor agreements. I assume the Council does the same. The bonus will be processed, along with a formal request that you please stop giving our medical staff emotional breakdowns. Both of them looked at me. I straightened my sensory stalks defensively. I am fine. Completely professional, not at all questioning the universe's decision to make humans simultaneously fragile and unkillable. Marcus grinned. See? Doc is handling it great. I am not handling it great. I am handling it adequately while internally screaming. That is the spirit. You are getting the hang of working with humans. Over the following weeks, I continued monitoring Marcus as he took on additional assignments for the Council. Each mission added new entries to his medical file. A mild toxin exposure here, a second-degree burn there, another healed fracture to add to his collection. He was right about one thing. He was very successful at his job. Every mission completed, every objective achieved, and every time he returned to my medical bay with new injuries and that same infuriating grin. Got something special this time, Doc, he said during one visit, pointing to a strange mark on his forearm. Electrical burn from hacking into a security system. Looks almost artistic, does not it? It looks like a medical emergency. You say tomato, I say evidence of a job well done. But I began to understand what made humans so effective as soldiers, mercenaries, and problem solvers. It was not superior technology or overwhelming strength. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, their willingness to sacrifice their own safety for mission success, their ability to sustain damage that would end other species and simply continue forward. They were not unkillable, but they were very, very hard to stop. And Marcus. He represented the best and most terrifying aspects of his species, brave to the point of recklessness, skilled beyond measure, tough enough to survive situations that should kill him, and absolutely convinced that every scar, every injury, every piece of shrapnel was worth it for the outcome achieved. "You know what, Doc?" he said during his final checkup before his contract ended. "I think we make a good team. You patch me up, I go break myself doing important work. Repeat as needed." That is not a healthy working relationship, Mr. Reeve. Maybe not, but it is effective. And in this galaxy, effective counts for a lot. I had to admit he was right. The Council's problems in the outer colonies had been resolved, hostages rescued, criminal operations disrupted, peace restored to contested territories, all because one human was willing to collect injuries like others collected medals. "Will you be renewing your contract?" I asked. "Thinking about it. The pay is good, the work is interesting, and I have grown fond of your concern for my well-being, Doc. Not many people worry about whether I am going to survive my job." "That is because most people have not seen your medical file." "Fair point. So what do you say? Want to keep patching up this statistical improbability for another tour?" I considered the question carefully. Working with Marcus had been stressful, anxiety-inducing, and completely contrary to everything I understood about proper medical care and self-preservation. It had also been fascinating, educational, and oddly rewarding. "If you renew your contract, I have one condition." "Name it." "You must promise to at least try to avoid collecting new injuries." Marcus laughed, that full, genuine laugh that echoed through the medical bay. "Doc, I can promise to try, but you know me. When the situation calls for it, I am going to do what needs doing, injuries and all." That is what I was afraid you would say. But hey, look on the bright side. Job security for you, right? I made a notation in his file. Patient demonstrates consistent disregard for personal safety in pursuit of mission objectives. Prognosis remains statistical improbability. Recommend continued monitoring and significant investment in medical supplies. "Welcome back to the Fourth Fleet, Mr. Reeve. Try not to die." "No promises, Doc, but I will do my best to keep disappointing death. I have been very good at it so far." And as he left my medical bay, already reviewing files for his next assignment, I realized something important about humans. They did not survive because they were indestructible. They survived because they refused to accept any other outcome. Every scar was proof of survival. Every injury was evidence of perseverance. Every healed wound was a victory over circumstances that should have ended them. Marcus collected injuries like trophies, not because he was careless, but because each one represented a moment when he could have quit and chose to continue instead. That, more than any biological advantage or technological superiority, was what made humans dangerous. They simply would not stop.